Last night's report put the spotlight on the $130 billion property downturn taking a toll on developers. Tonight, home builders and tradies in the front line of a construction slowdown. Home prices are now down almost 7% since their peak, which has flowed on to big falls in the rate of new house and apartment builds. And that's seen 40,000 construction jobs go in a year. Rachel Pupazzoni has the story.
Zakala Homes has been building residential properties in Melbourne for 60 years. In the more than half a dozen housing downturns it's gone through, this is among the worst they've seen. And it's hit their order book in a big way.
We're probably seeing a reduction of around 30% in sales. We do a bit of business with some investors, but mostly our bread and butter, I guess, is owner-occupiers. We're seeing a pretty much consistent reduction of that sort of amount.
That 30% hit has meant Greg Zakala has already had to lay off 4 staff.
We've had to adjust things there to meet the market, and so I think a lot of building companies these days are at the moment finding the same situation.
Residential construction is a $105 billion a year business, and as Australia's 4th biggest sector, it accounts for 8% of GDP. Its downward trajectory is not just hurting builders.
2 years ago, we literally didn't have time to price all the jobs that were coming, but now it's rare, and there's a lot of jobs getting postponed and put back, and just people just holding off to see what happens.
Ray Sheriff has a team of electricians working on residential and commercial projects in Sydney. When residential construction was booming, it filled a big chunk of his books.
Originally, maybe 3 to 4 years ago, we were probably looking at 50 to 60% of our business was. Now we're probably looking at 20 to 30.
Official figures show national dwelling approvals were down almost 29% in the year to January, its lowest figure since May 2013. Only Western Australia and Tasmania are bucking the trend, with approvals on the way up. The rate of contraction in housing construction is the fastest it's been in 6.5 years, and apartment construction rates have fallen for 11 months in a row. Those numbers are only going to get worse, with the housing market still falling. And there's evidence it's hurting right down the billion-dollar supply chain. CSR has mothballed one of its brick kilns in Sydney as demand for building materials slows.
When you have house prices falling as they are at the moment, the risks of entering to that are greater, and that's one of the reasons why activity is starting to move down. It's a riskier predicament for all concerned.
The slowdown has led to an influx of workers looking for a job.
The hire agencies are ringing us regularly now, and it's not just with 1 or 2 guys, they're ringing with 15, 20 guys looking. We've got guys coming off a project, so that's quite noticeable. That's the first thing you notice.
Seek job ads for the construction sector have fallen 14% in the last year, and with more than 1 million workers in the housing construction sector, some are being forced to look elsewhere.
Now it's just a matter of people finding other industries or new construction, different sorts of construction projects to work in. For example, mining, infrastructure.
As construction hits the slow lane, it's clear fewer homes will be built this year than last, and the downward trend is set to continue for some time. But in spite of all of that, overall numbers are still historically high.
New home building activity peaked back in 2016 at about 230,000. We see it bottoming out at about 175,000 over the next few years. You know, that's a substantial fall, but it is worth emphasising that 175,000 as a low point would still be the highest ever low point for new home building on record.
For the time being, those at the coalface are doing all they can to keep the work coming in.